Now I wish to discuss a little bit how we might manage a situation if we did have white grubs that required some sort of response. Now, the injury is going to be done by the larvae. The larvae are going to do root pruning, and they're going to do progressively more root pruning as they get older. So essentially what we wish to do is prevent late stage larvae from being present and doing the maximum amount of injury that they are capable of. And there are various ways we can mitigate these effects of a white grub infestation through certain cultural practices, through the use of insecticides, and there are some biological controls that can be used as well. In terms of cultural practices, perhaps the most important thing is to have lawns that are in a state of vigor, that are growing in a manner that allows the turf to better tolerate the kind of injury, and after the insects have passed, to allow it to regrow and recover. But one of the fundamental things that would be important in considering the potential of a white grub to do damage is, what does the root system look like? And obviously, since this is something that will damage the root system, grasses that have a larger root mass are going to be better able to tolerate the effects of root pruning injuries. Now, there are various ways that you can improve the root mass through deep watering, through certain kinds of fertilization, but perhaps mowing height is the most obvious one, factor that can be manipulated to determine what kind of root mass you're going to have on your turf site. If you mow very low regularly, you'll have a very restricted root system. If you allow it to grow a little taller, your root system will be more vigorous, and consequently you will have a root mass that will tolerate a greater amount of grubs, everything else being the same, without causing injury in a significant way. So mowing height would be something that you could manipulate. The watering is kind of a mixed issue. A couple of things are associated with watering. One is that grubs are highly sensitive to soil moisture when they're laying eggs, and in some cases in the first stage, and the Japanese beetle is an example of the latter. So if we have turf that is not overly watered and is allowed to dry down a little bit during these periods when the insects are laying eggs and the eggs are hatching, then their survival will be lower. On the other hand, if you do have grubs that are already past this stage and are actively feeding, and the lawn is being damaged, then watering is going to be useful for helping the plant recover or tolerate the kind of injury that's being done. Now, the target stage, if we're talking about insecticides, is the young larvae. Young larvae are more susceptible to the effects of insecticides that we have. It also, if you get them during early stages, then they're not going to be doing as much damage as if you try to get them late. So a preventive treatment, or a treatment timed for the period when the eggs are being laid and the eggs are hatching, is generally the principle in terms of timing a white grub treatment. So what you want to do is figure out when that is. So masked chafers, Japanese beetles, these are annual white grubs that usually are laying their eggs in late June or early July. If you had a May-June beetle, they'll be laying their eggs about a month earlier than that. So you wish to have a treatment applied, if you're using a preventive insecticide, applied at the point when eggs are being laid and eggs are hatching, because those early larval stages are the best target. They're much more susceptible to the insecticides we have during early stages. A rescue treatment directed against late stage larvae is generally much less successful, because they're more tolerant of the insecticides, less susceptible to their effects. So we try to target them before they get too big. And there are presently a handful of insecticides that are now used. These are quite different from what were used 10-15 years ago, when things like diazinon or Sevin were used in lawns. Now we have a handful of insecticides, as well as some biological controls we can use. Now the first two, imidacloprid and clothianidin, are insecticides that are quite effective, but they are also in the neonicotinoid class and have some systemic activity. So these insecticides can be quite effective against white grubs. At the same time, they also do get translocated into plant parts above ground, which can be useful for controlling insects that are feeding on above ground parts of the plant. So these systemic insecticides presently on the market are imidacloprid, clothianidin primarily. The thiamethoxam is usually used for golf courses. Sometimes they're in combination. You'll see mixtures of a neonicotinoid insecticide with systemic activity with a contact product, a pyrethroid insecticide, usually to control a mixture of insects. But the reason I'm bringing this up because this raises the issue with potential impacts on pollinators, and should we be concerned about their use on turfgrass? Well, normally pollinators will not be visiting turfgrass, at least if it is just a uniform turfgrass system. But in many cases, it is not a uniform species of a grass. There are flowering plants, notably dandelions or clovers, found in lawns. And at this point, these lawns may be very attractive to many kinds of pollinating insects. And in these cases, systemic insecticides applied for a grub in the soil have the potential for also moving into the above ground parts of the plant, including nectar and pollen. So then it becomes a risk. So the key risk to pollinators when using insecticides in turfgrass is if we have flowering weeds at a site. So how do we manage that? Well, one, if we have this situation, perhaps we consider a plan B, something that does not move into the nectar and pollen. But if these are used, it has been demonstrated that you can greatly reduce the risk if you mow just before you make an application of these insecticides, because the area will not be attractive to pollinators for several days, and the residues of the insecticides will be greatly reduced in above ground parts of the plant in the course of this. So if you are to be using an insecticide on a turfgrass site that does have a lot of flowering plants on it, clovers, dandelion, it is a very good practice to mow that area before you make the insecticide treatment to reduce the risk to pollinators. Now there are some alternative white grub treatments if we're looking at a standard insecticide. The newer product chlorantraniliprole, under trade names such as acelepryn or the Scott's Grub X, is a much less hazardous material to pollinating insects. It is very low hazard to pollinating insects compared to some of the systemic insecticides in the neonicotinoid class. But there are also biological controls. And there are a couple of biological controls that could be considered and might be desirable in certain situations. One that's been mentioned in a couple of contexts before are these insect parasitic nematodes, the predator nematodes, the beneficial nematodes. These are a couple of genera of nematodes that develop in insects. They invade the body of insects through natural openings, the mouth, the anus, the spiracles, and once they get inside the body of a host insect, they will then release a bacterium that the nematode carries with them, and then the bacterium grows. Now, if we're talking about white grubs, there's one group of nematodes to consider. There are several that are sold in a couple of genera, but for white grubs, only the genus Heterorhabditis, nematodes in the genus Heterorhabditis, consistently control white grubs. The other common genus, Steinernema, used to be Neoplectana, they're incapable of moving through the body wall of the insect and cannot effectively control white grubs. So not just any nematode, one in the genus Heterorhabditis. And these insect parasitic nematodes can control many other turfgrass insects, Right now we're talking white grubs, but we'll mention them again with bill bugs and a little bit with the cutworms, sod webworms as well. But basically, once these get into the body of the insect, they release a bacterium. In the case of the nematodes in the genus Heterorhabditis, the insect becomes a kind of reddish color, and that is indication of the bacteria that are growing in that affected white grub in this case. The bacteria degrade the body tissues, the nematodes feed on the bacteria in the degraded body tissues and then reproduce and then move into the soil and perhaps infect another white grub. We don't think that these survive very well between seasons, so insect parasitic nematodes would be used as a one-shot kind of treatment like any kind of insecticide, essentially a biological insecticide. You have a problem, you use this, or you use a standard insecticide, and then if the problem returns next year, you consider doing it again. There is one new product as well on the market, and it looks from reports so far to be fairly effective. It's a bacterium. It's a bacterium in the genus Bacillus, species Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a strain of Bacillus thuringiensis. There are several strains of this bacteria that work on different kinds of insects, and the Galeriae subspecies is one that works on white grubs and is just entering the market. Presently it's under the trade name Grubgone, is the only one I think that is presently available. You'll probably see others in the future as well, and this would be applied as a sprayed mixture, watered into the soil, and the grubs, if they feed on the bacteria, will be killed after ingesting it. So for white grubs, we have primarily 3 insecticides widely available and 2 biological controls. There's a couple others that are minor that still are around, but these are the primary ones we have presently to control white grubs, and they can be very effective. We can probably control white grubs better at this point in time than we have ever before in history. And in general, the kinds of products we have now are quite a bit safer, particularly to mammals and birds, than what we were using not too long ago. So that's it for white grubs. The next section we'll move on and discuss another kind of turfgrass insect, the bill bugs.